SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
If you're feeling anxious about your investments with all the economic volatility and chaos in Washington, tune in to SuperTalk Jackson on Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m. and Sundays from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. for Element Wealth Radio with Jeremy Nelson. Learn more at myelementwealth.com.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Hump Day.
Morning there, Rhino. What's up?
Oh, not too terribly much. We're a little peek behind the curtain, which is the opposite of the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. No, we're giving you a look back here. There's a computer that holds the skeleton for the show. And I put the meat on the bones, and then Gerard fills up the rest of it. And that's the bare bones technology of the show.
Yeah.
We are flying blind. That computer has decided it doesn't want a computer anymore.
Yeah, indeed. And so we had to do a little makeshifting, at least so we can tell when things start and end. Whew, just in the old nick of time. But you have to improvise, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we're doing that.
The show starts when the show starts, whether we're ready or not.
I've said it many times. Your butt better be in the chair behind that mic because it don't wait for you. Man, oh, man. But we're here the day after elections, municipal elections. I got to apologize for something before we get going here. Yesterday, right at the end of the show, I kind of blew it in what I was talking about. And it's not making excuses, but I had texts coming in on the text line, text on my phone, an email that caught my attention, and watching that clock wind down at the same time. And I lost focus. And so I ended with some statements that, honestly, I was talking about the Doge cuts and how those would be handled. And so I apologize for that. When we went off the air yesterday, I didn't make any sense in what I was saying. I'm going to get to that and clarify that just so you guys will know. Please accept my apology for the nonsensical couple of statements there right at the end of the program. I got to do a little better making sure I don't get distracted. And as Rhino well knows, this is a job where you really need to be able to multitask.
I liken it to the spinning plates. You used to see it a lot more often. Now it's not quite as much of a fun sideshow. But remember the spinning plates? You got the poles, and they'll put a plate on there, and they'll start spinning one. And they'll get it spinning. They'll go to the next one, get it spinning. Then go back to the other one and get it spinning again. Then add another one. And they just keep adding more spinning plates.
Great metaphor, because that's what's going on. So, again, no excuses. My apologies. Sorry about that. I'll do my best not to let that happen. But it's easy, as you know. I tell you what's hard is when we're doing these remotes, which are great, but if there's lots of ambient noise near your headset, and that's coming through your mic, is what's happening. Your mic boom's picking it up. That's in your ear, so you're trying to talk and pay attention with people talking in your ear essentially at the same time, and you've really got to kind of train yourself and focus. I found that to be difficult. Have gotten better at that we've done a lot of remotes in the last 4.5 years that I've been doing this job full time. But nonetheless, we'll get to that later. First, municipal elections across the Magnolia State took place yesterday. I think it's fair to say some surprises, some not surprises. In the city of Jackson, let's start there. State Senator John Horn, the Democrat, honestly, he cruised to victory. That was a larger margin than I expected. He got 66% of the vote over 5 other candidates. Of course, remember, he defeated the incumbent Chokwe Lumumba, let me pronounce it correctly, in the April Democratic primary runoff. Of course, that pushed him into the general election. Second place, Rodney DePriest, an independent, who gained 28% of the vote. So, congratulations to State Senator John Horn. He is the new mayor of the city of Jackson. I believe we may have him on the program tomorrow to hear his thoughts and his plans for this new role as a mayor. In Vicksburg, little bit of a shock there. Rhino incumbent Mayor George Flax, whom we've interviewed before on the program. He's a great friend of SuperTalk. Former Democrat who transitioned to an independent. He lost his bid for re-election. 42.5% of the vote. Keep in mind, folks, in the state of Mississippi, we don't have runoffs in municipal general election. It's just whoever gets the most takes the prize.
I think there are some municipalities that have a runoff, but it's not mandated.
Okay, right. That's right. And it's the MML, my understanding, who opposes runoffs. I'm not sure of the reason. Maybe we'll talk about that when we host a show from the annual MML conference this year. We'll have some folks on
when
there.
you think about it, if you have to put all the time and effort and energy into starting an election or running an election, and you have 1,200 people show up to vote, and you don't get a result, are you going to have 1,200 people show up again, or is it going to be less? And you do just wind up with diminishing returns after one runoff or so?
I think that's the fundamental problem is turnout just is generally low in municipal elections, especially when it's June, as it is this year. So, Brookhaven, this was a bit of a surprise. Democrat Larry Jointer appears to have upset the incumbent Republican Mayor Joe Cox. 40 votes separating those candidates. In Canton, in my home county of Madison, Democrat Tim Taylor appears to have prevailed over Republican Chip Mathews. This is not the first time Mr. Mathews has sought this office. Also an independent candidate, Walter Peoples, in the race. The incumbent mayor in Canton, William Truly, the Democrat, did not seek re-election. Mayor Tim Kyle, an independent, appears to have lost to Marvin Miles Jr., the Democrat nominee, by just over 30 votes. Gautier, Mayor Casey Vaughn, an independent, won re-election over Republican Phil Torgeson in a rematch. That was 4 years ago. I think Torgeson was the mayor of Vaughn, Mississippi, prior. Incumbent Mayor Carolyn McAdams in Greenwood lost to Democrat Kendrick Cox. Received 53% of the vote last time I checked. Now, Carolyn McAdams, the mayor of Greenwood, has been on the program numerous times before, mainly discussing the Greenwood LaFleur Hospital, which has been saddled with a series of financial problems. Clarksdale Representative Orlando Pace, State Rep Orlando Pace, won the mayor's race, will replace two-term Mayor Chuck Espy, who didn't run, by the way, for re-election. Wiggins incumbent independent Mayor Darrell Berry won re-election over Republican challenger Heather Patterson. Horn Lake, Democrat nominee Jimmy Stokes beat Republican nominee Danny Klein, who's the current alderman at large. So that would be the new mayor of Horn Lake. And we got several others. Democrat incumbent Lynn Spruill, no surprise there, easily defeated her Republican challenger with 80% of the vote. We've, of course, interviewed Mayor Spruill many times. Mayor Hope McGee-Jones defended her seat to win re-election over Republican challenger Gerald Elsie. That's in Collins. You know, we do the remote down there. We always have the pleasure of interviewing the mayor, Hope McGee. And then in the city of McGee, Republican nominee Mark Grubbs, the current Ward 1 alderman, took down Jim Snyder, the independent, to win at what was an open seat. The incumbent mayor dropped out of the race, had health concerns. Incumbent Republican Mayor Jake Wyndham of Pearl also prevailed with 78% of the vote. Republican nominee Jim Fulton, a 3-term alderman in Philadelphia. This was a bit of a surprise. Looks like defeated Democrat nominee Leroy Clemens. The incumbent there, Democrat James Young, did not make the primary runoff, finishing 3rd in the field. The other one that's really intriguing, we'll get to it on the other side of the break, is the race for Alderman Ward 1 in Jackson. Ashby Foote, whom I just had breakfast with, a good friend, he right now is in the lead. But have you seen this one, Rhino? They each have 33%. There's 3 candidates. They each have 33% and change. With absentee votes, of course, and affidavit votes still outstanding. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
That's what the world is today.
Hey, this is Bob. And
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Those days are over. You don't have to sell your body to the night. Roxanne, you don't have to wear that dress tonight.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We've got Christopher Green joining us at 10:35 in the next segment. He is now the Assistant Director of the Chase Center for Civics, Culture, and Society at The Ohio State University. Ricky Mathews, host of SuperTalk Coast View and SuperTalk Outdoors, joins the program at 12:20.
I think it's the Ricky Mathews Show now.
Oh, pardon me. You're right about that. It's the Ricky Mathews Show. Okay. So I misspoke there. Apologize for that. Man, I'm just making all kinds of errors. I will say I'm reading this from our sheet, so I apologize. He's coming on at 12:20, and we're going to break down the mayoral elections and, of course, all the allegations at this point of election fraud in this very contentious Gulfport race. We didn't even talk about that one in the last segment. Didn't get to it. Gulfport, as it stands right now, the Republican candidate Hugh Keating leads the Democrat candidate Sonia Barnes. The separation there is 1,100 votes. There are 1,400 outstanding absentee ballots. Based on the trends, it's hard to imagine that she could overcome that level of difference, that margin. So 1,400 outstanding, 1,100 separates the two. You can do the math there. She'd have to take over 60% of those. It's not likely, given the current standing in the race. And in Mississippi, under Mississippi law, we talked about this with the Secretary of State yesterday. Your absentee ballot, mail-in absentee ballot, has to be postmarked by Election Day, into business Election Day. But under Mississippi law, we can still count those if they're received within, it's 5 days, right, Rhino, of Election Day? But they got to be postmarked Election Day. So 5 days after that. So at this point, you could probably call it for Hugh Keating, the Republican in Gulfport. And maybe some of the AP and some of the press has done so. I haven't checked that lately. It's just
I haven't seen where it's been called yet. They're just having the graphics say 100% reported in.
Okay. So we may have to, and that always means, okay, except for the absentees. And so we may have to wait a couple of days to get it called and make it official. So that's where we stand on that race. Perhaps the one that got more attention than any other in the state, I think, because it's a big city in Mississippi, Gulfport, because you had an strong incumbent mayor, Billy Hughes, that decided not to seek re-election. And you had a Democrat candidate who received lots of support, financial and otherwise, from out-of-state sources, including Democrat Stacey Abrams of Georgia, of Atlanta, who ran unsuccessfully for governor, who still claims she won this thing, Rhino, the governor's race over there. And she inserted herself in this race as well. And, of course, you saw Benny Thompson show up, throw his weight. On the Republican side, GOP Chairman Mike Hurst, who was on the program last week, he called attention to this, looks like, borderline vote-buying scheme, giving vouchers for food if you show up with proof that you have voted absentee. That went on at the end of the week last week or throughout the week last week. And they also brought in the heavy hitters. They brought in Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith and Senator Tim Scott from the great state of South Carolina traveled to Gulfport for a rally that late last week for Hugh Keating. So I personally think Hugh would do a great job as the mayor of Gulfport. And I also need to point out, got to play a little music with him a couple of weeks ago. He's a pretty good bassist. And when we did the big event down there at Centennial Plaza Thursday before last, that was a whole bunch of fun. Ricky Mathews, of course, also, we'll talk about that. He played drums on a couple of songs. I think he had Hugh when he was playing on the bass. A lot of fun. So, but man, this Ward 1 Jackson race featuring three candidates, an independent, a Democrat, and, of course, a Republican, that being the incumbent Ashby Foote. Here are the standings, folks, the vote counts. 1,738 votes as of Tuesday night for the incumbent Foote. 1,728 for challenger Green. I'm looking for the first name. I can't remember Green's first name. And then you had also, I believe it's Jasmine Barnes, if I'm not mistaken. Grace Green, yes. Then Jasmine Barnes, the Democrat, had 1713. So again, 1738 for Foote, 1728 for Green, 1713 for Barnes. You can do the math. 10 votes separating the leader and the second place candidate, and then separating the third place candidate from the leader, Foote, 25 votes, and 15 votes separating the third place candidate and the second place. 1738, 1728, 1713. I think it's safe to say that's a pretty evenly divided district in terms of the voters, or ward, I should say.
And people say your vote doesn't matter.
Man, does it ever hear? 10 votes separating the top two and 25 the top from the bottom. That's really incredible. So, again, it looks like that City Councilman Foote will prevail. But you still got to wait for the absentee ballots, and I can't find any information about how many are outstanding on that one, Rhino. I looked, couldn't find it. But I think you got to wait, see what happens. And again, enjoyed breakfast with Ashby and a couple other folks this morning, and he felt pretty confident. But if you look at it, I don't have it right from me, 33.6 and 33.4. I mean, it's all 33% and change. It's a fraction that separates first and second, first and third, second and third. That's incredible. Less than 1% separate the three to each other. Wow. Unbelievable. But that's where we are, municipal elections in the state of Mississippi. Here's a good question, Jim in the Delta, and I got to say, Rhino, I don't know the answer. You and I did research this once before, but it's been a while, and I can't recall what we learned. Peden will take office in Clarksdale July 1. When and how will his successor for state rep be filled? I don't remember the rules on that. I know you're looking into that right now. It, of course, differs per state. I think it's governed by state law, state statute, the rules around when a seat is vacated in the state legislature, how that seat is then subsequently filled. I know how it works at the federal level, but I'm not sure at the state level. But yeah,
the state level, it all comes down to deadline, the June 1 deadline. If a vacancy occurs before June the 1st, then June the 1st in an election year, then the governor must call a special election within 30 days of the vacancy and provide at least 40 days notice to the counties in the affected district.
Okay.
If the vacancy occurs after June 1 in an election year, no special election is held.
Okay. I would suspect that's in the interest of cost, honestly. Yeah. Let's don't have just one big deal for one seat, for example, which could happen. Now, we do have some special elections coming up as a result of redistricting for legislative seats, both on the House and the Senate side, I believe, in Mississippi. So perhaps it would be combined with that. I'm not sure what the rules say about that. But nonetheless, yeah, you're going to have a new rep that would hold the seat that presently represents that district since Peden was elected to be the mayor in Clarksdale. Interesting. How could the state move all elections to either year of presidential election or off year U.S. rep, and in November? This would keep from having an election every year, and people would have several reasons to go to the poll. Why municipal elections in June? Are they in June? I'm sorry, that's on the C Spire text line. This is even more odd time. Well, it's not just municipal elections that are held in June, right?
No, but the reason Mississippi municipal elections are held in this year is to offset it from state and federal elections, so that the smaller campaigns don't get lost in all of the hoopla of the larger campaigns.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think it's fine the way it is. We're stepping aside for a break from the Element Wealth studio. Next up, Christopher Green. Stay with us.
From the SeabrookPaint.com.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
She's real fine, my 409. She's real fine, my 409, my 409. Well, I saved my pennies and I saved my dimes. Giddy up, 409. Before I knew there would be a time. Giddy up, 409. When I would buy a brand new 409.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're coming at you from the Element Wealth studio. We welcome now Christopher Green, Assistant Director, Chase Center for Civics, Culture, and Society at The Ohio State University. Professor, good to see you again, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you. Sounds like there's all kinds of exciting municipal election stuff going on. My grandmother was named Foote, and of course I'm named Green, so my cousins are really, really close in the balloting in that ward race. But these are important elections, so it's good to see people turning out and saying, hey, I can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I'm not sure that I can remember the last time municipal elections in Mississippi garnered this level of attention. I think with the capital city once we got through the primary, knowing that we were going to have a new mayor. He had a lot of eyes on that. And then another major city in Mississippi, Gulfport, of course, with the incumbent Billy Hughes stepping down, and that it created essentially a very contentious race where you had national figures getting involved. Not something you'd expect to see in a city such as Gulfport. But that made it intriguing.
It's important.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so you're all squared away in your new gig, right, at the Ohio State University.
Well,
go ahead.
The move is happening in stages. So
Okay.
I've moved 79 bankers' boxes of books, and I probably have about another 79 more. So it's I'm getting a workout.
Okay.
Learning places I can abscond to do a little bit of media work.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you joining us today. So the Supreme Court is in full swing right now, right? They've got a docket that they're addressing. And the first thing I guess I want to get you to discuss with us is we're seeing that many of these cases, I guess, are categorized as emergency. What exactly does that mean?
Well, yeah, that is a huge, huge question. And, sometimes you look at, especially this recent decision on tariffs, the president has this emergency power to impose tariffs. And, one way to think about the response that the court gave to it is like the only emergency here is you. You've been thinking, you haven't been a big fan of international trade since the 1980s when you were going on Oprah saying we got to deal with this trade deficit, saying goods coming into the country are somehow a bad thing. So, generally, an emergency is going to be something that emerges. Something that happens too quickly for the legislature to respond. That would be one really restrictive way to do it. We saw it during COVID. The stuff in early 2020, we'd have the governor come in and do stuff, and then they were still doing it like a year later. When you think, well, the legislature could have addressed it. They could have put these tariff things. So the tariff stuff, the immigration stuff, it could have been in a bill. We've got this opportunity to pass a bill with lots of stuff in it. It could have contained tariff stuff as well. And it might yet contain some tariff stuff, contain some immigration stuff. So the tradition of just kind of letting the president solve the problems. The legislature said, well, we don't want to have responsibility. Just let the president do it. It breeds more emergencies. The more you use emergency powers to get things that could have been done by a legislature, the more emergencies you're going to seem to have.
Yeah.
Foreign negotiations, there's no question. Stuff happens very quickly. And there's also secrets, right? So the president knows things about what's going across the border that he can't divulge publicly. So there really is a sense in which, having the ability to suddenly, tomorrow, say, hey, you're not going to be able to import that unless you pay a whole lot more. It does have a rationale in terms of the system we've designed. If you think of, Chinese stuff importing whatever it is that, might be useful for attacking Taiwan or something, building business relationships related to the semiconductor industry, that kind of thing. Yeah, there's national security secrets we've got. There's the need for speed. But generally speaking, stuff that takes a long time doesn't seem to be an emergency.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question, Professor. Can the Supreme Court, can they issue an injunction just like lower courts can? Is that within their purview?
Yeah. So the traditional phrase that they use, there's this section 1651, the All Writs Act. They're allowed to do things in order to preserve their jurisdiction. So there's a bunch of other things they can do. So generally, if you go to a trial court and say, hey, I want an injunction, they don't give it to you, go on appeal, they don't, or maybe they do. You could, just take that in the ordinary course of business. But then you have this question. A big question is the scope of these injunctions. So who exactly can they deal with? So if you have a class action, are you allowed before you certify a class to tell the defendant, tell the executive branch usually in these big cases, don't do this with respect to anybody. with respect to the purported class. And there's a lot of interpretive lack of clarity with respect to like when exactly you can have an injunction. But then you have this catch-all of, well, we've got to be able to do this in order to preserve our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So in these immigration cases, that's, there's a reasonable argument. Hey, if you let them send these people to El Salvador, then we wouldn't have jurisdiction about habeas corpus. You can't tell. So habeas corpus, the traditional thing, is a court telling the executive, hey, give me the body. If you don't have the body anymore, you don't have jurisdiction. So, there's a reasonable argument in that kind of case that, hey, if you deport them, we don't have jurisdiction with respect to whatever the claim is. So it always, the existence of the claim, whether there's actually a right that people can invoke, bleeds into the question of remedies, which is can you get an order telling the defendant to do it with respect to one person or with respect to other similarly situated people. And a lot of the statutes, they could be reformed, they could be clarified, and it would be good if we weren't just relying on this very, very broad language. But there's some just kind of basic plumbing of the court system stuff, kind of good government reform, the kind of stuff that John McCain was always saying, like we just need to get together and pursue the common good and that kind of stuff. There's there's a target-rich environment of kind of basic reforms that we could get if we weren't engaged in trench warfare in D.C. all the time. But,
so besides the tariff case, and I'm not exactly sure who the plaintiffs are in that particular case that are suing the administration there.
A bunch of them are states. So you get the kind of the legal wherewithal just to get together and say, hey, we've got a team that wants the administration not to win. So some of it might be just, some state saying we want to buy something from, Michigan wants to buy something from Canada and, they have to pay a little bit more. So then they use that as the hook to give them standing to litigate the whole thing. But the standing question was a huge issue in the Court of International Trade. And it could if the administration decides like, whoa, we just really, really don't want this decided right now, that kind of thing could be an argument to put it off. But generally, if people have to pay more money for something, they're going to have standing. Okay. So it's not as easy for the administration to avoid a decision on that coming down. Of course, the court itself could just say, well, we're going to take our time and really think carefully about whether the president has all this emergency power that he claims.
And I assume because this is having a real measurable effect, as long as it's in place, the court is somewhat motivated to rule on it in case, I guess, damages are perceived to being done in the court's opinion. They need to act on this.
Yeah, so one big question you have is there an ability to deal with this with money damages later? So you wouldn't necessarily. So if if you find out, oh my goodness, all those tariffs that we were paying for 3 months, they're actually illegal. Does that give you automatically a right to get to a rebate? Well, not necessarily. You could say, well, your obligation to pay was based on the apparent legality of it, and as long as it was apparently legal, you don't have to unwind it. So depending on that, so when you resolve that question, that helps you determine whether it really is irremediable. If there wouldn't be any damages thing to worry about, well, you say, well, just sort of, make do, and we'll decide this when we decide it. Yeah. Traditionally, presidents have been able to impose tariffs more or less at whim. Trump's doing it way more than has been done, though. So there's a reason they are taking a close look at it.
We are up against a break, but we have a short segment. If you can hang with us remaining in this hour, we can get to some of these other cases that the courts are expected to hear. Can you stay with us?
Sure, I can talk to you for a few more minutes.
Great. We got Christopher Green from the Element Wealth studio calling in. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
So hard to please, but look around, leaves are brown, and the sky is a hazy shade of winter.
Welcome back, everyone. Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're visiting with Professor Christopher Green. So, besides this tariff case, Professor, what else are you following that's coming before the Supreme Court?
Well, so of course we've got all the cases that they have been, so the non-emergency cases, the ones they've been arguing all year, all of those are going to be coming in the next few weeks. So a bunch of Thursdays are set. They say they may release opinions. They reserve the right not to, but it's pretty clear we're going to get something tomorrow, and then a week later, a week after that, probably some other days. So one of the big ones that that I'm particularly looking forward to seeing what the court has to say is the Skermeti case, the Tennessee ban on cross-gender hormones. So that's just a huge thing that not really on the emergency docket, but that's certainly that they have some other big ones with respect to just delegation of power to the administrative state that they could do some things. On the emergency docket itself, you've got you do have the tariff case that's going to come before too long. You have a bunch of immigration cases. There's so many different immigration cases. It really is kind of wild. But they recently said that the Trump administration is allowed to immediately terminate this categorical thing that the Biden administration did with respect to certain countries. So basically, Trump wants to go back to doing a case-by-case evaluation of whether people like from Cuba and Venezuela get parole into the country. And a lower court has said you have to do a piece-by-piece evaluation of the previous categorical rule. So it really, as with many immigration things, gets very complicated. Yeah. There have been some of the questions about the president's control of the federal bureaucracy. Those have been some big, huge cases. So is the president allowed to remove people who are exercising executive power? And for years, everybody has been waiting for this old case from 1935, Humphrey's executor, to be overruled, because it really is in significant tension with later cases that say the president can have control over the executive branch, over the entire executive branch. So there have been some recent cases on the emergency docket related to that. But more are coming, and that will probably produce some more fodder. At some point, they're going to take a case and just say, look, is our insulation of certain agencies from presidential control okay? They may put a carve-out for the Fed. The question of whether the president can just unilaterally just tell the Fed to lower interest rates, that would be a significant. I imagine the financial markets might have something to say about that. Yeah. Might be, but you might say, well, the financial markets are enough control over the president. He doesn't have to have constitutional insulation. He could just be, pay attention to the election returns and the stock market.
Yeah. Well, and so what's the schedule? As I recall, the way this thing typically plays out is there's like these waterfall of decisions that come out one after another. And what's the schedule? What do they call that? The term, I believe. Is that the legal term?
Yeah, the October term.
Okay.
So they start hearing cases, having oral arguments in October, November, December. And then some more kind of mid-January, February, April. They had an extra one about the birthright citizenship case, kind of some aspects of the nationwide injunction with respect to it in May.
Okay.
They probably will decide that as well by the end of June. But if you look at the justices' schedules, a lot of them are scheduled to go teach somewhere in like the first week of July. During the COVID year, they stayed until late July, and in theory they could do it. If something were really, really, really important, they would. What they would do would be, phone it in from Europe and give us a decision from wherever that is, if there's an emergency. But in theory, they could they could fly home. The 25th Amendment says that Congress can be assembled within 48 hours if it's important to decide whether the president is unable to perform the office. In theory, the Supreme Court, if they really, really wanted to see each other face to face to talk about something, they could do it. But again, they could find a background and find a place to have a video conference if they wanted to do that. But other things being equal, it'll be by the end of June.
Okay.
So June 26th, 7th. We've had lots and lots of big decisions on those kind of dates, and that's about what we're looking at. So probably another 3 weeks.
Man, it's going to be exciting. Professor Christopher Green has been our guest. Thanks so much for coming on. Always enjoy your insights, and it's very informative. Thanks a lot, Professor. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Take care.
You bet. We're stepping aside for Fox News and Super Talk News. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. You are tuned in to Middays. We are live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
Dang right. We're here. We're ready to go. And hour 2 of the program is now underway. Appreciate Christopher Green, who has moved on from the University of Mississippi to the Ohio State University. And we appreciate him calling in and giving us the rundown on these SCOTUS cases. Seems like the Supreme Court of late is just inundated with cases that deal with the executive branch, does it not? Everything that comes out is the executive branch. Huh. So, all right, yesterday at the end of the show, I got a little tongue-tied trying to multitask, and I guess it's fair to say it's especially hard to convey numerical information when you're getting a little tongue-tied and distracted. So here's the deal. There's all this talk about the Doge cuts, and a lot of folks are upset that they haven't seen significant effort on the part of the Congress to codify the Doge cuts. And Rhino and I actually talked about this after the show somewhat. So here's the deal. When Elon Musk first came onto the scene and was expected to be installed in this capacity, he gets there and says, yeah, I think we can find $2 trillion. And then it wasn't long after that, after they got mobilized and had a pretty good idea of what they were dealing with, most of which just honestly involve fairly straightforward use of software tools, such as scrub these databases, which are ancient. Wasn't that hard, pretty straightforward. And just identify anomalies in the data. That was a lot of it. And by identifying the anomalies, you know how that works. One thing led to another, and led to another, and led to another, and the first thing you know, you start peeling back the old layers of the onion. It's like, wait, we're paying for Sesame Street in Iran or whatever the heck it was. My favorite, if I hope I get this right, studying the psychological effects of women who are pregnant but think they're men. Why are we spending money on that? I think most clear-thinking people would say that's insane that we're even wasting money in that way. And the list is long, as you know, of that kind of crazy stuff. So people are concerned that the Congress isn't acting. And so when we talk about on all of these findings, we went from $2 trillion. He then backed that down to $1 trillion, and it's been pretty stable at $170 billion now for a few weeks. So there was a lot of excitement early on. Look, we're finding X billion per day. Remember, that was the kind of the runway. Well, as every day goes by and there's not more identified, that average per day, of course, is decreasing. But the bottom line is we went from $2 trillion, Elon Musk's goal, to $1 trillion, to now $170 billion. And, of course, he exited last week, as we talked about. And now he's gone out on social media. You've probably seen this. This has created quite the firestorm where he is scolding the Congress. And, honestly, you'd have to say the president as well, because the president supports the One Big Beautiful Bill. By the way, it is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That is how it's styled. Oh, they're so creative up there in Washington. It's the OBBA. The first time I saw that, I said, what the heck are they talking about? Then I realized, oh, heck, that is literally the title of the legislation. So he's blasting the Congress, and I would say, by extension and association, the president. It's not going to surprise me if we don't see the president respond in a more robust fashion. Now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday was asked a question. What do you think about Elon Musk criticizing the One Big Beautiful Bill? And she said, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but basically she said, well, the president's always known where Elon Musk stands, and it doesn't change his position. Next question. That really was the answer. So this issue of codifying, which simply means Congress passes a law, is a complicated one. It's more nuanced than I think meets the eye. You're laughing.
I mean, it's not that long ago that there was a common phrase in the pop culture lexicon that it would, quote unquote, take an act of Congress to get something done, meaning it's really difficult.
Thank you. I had forgotten about that. You're right. That is a metaphor that is used to describe very challenging tasks and endeavors. So completely right. Great point. So you've seen this meme going around, and like we said a couple of days ago, you're shocked to know that all these internet memes might not be completely as portrayed. Well, the one that everybody's upset about are the 26 senators that ostensibly, allegedly voted against codification of the DOJ findings. Included among those 26 are Mississippi senators, Roger Wicker and Cindy Hyde-Smith, 24 other Republicans. And so just to clarify, what they voted against was an amendment to the continuing resolution introduced by Rand Paul. And it would have rescinded funding for some of the crazy stuff. Specifically, the foreign aid dollars included and managed by the USAID agency. That's probably, wouldn't you agree, Rhino's got more attention than anything of the DOJ stuff, because people are already steamed about, understandably, the amount of money we send overseas. That is questionable is a nice way to put it, that American taxpayers are receiving value for such investment, for said investment.
And it was definitely inflamed by all the video and photographic evidence of the misuse of that funding, such as, terrorists recording videos threatening to end the lives of Americans with USAID plastic covering whatever abode they're in.
Absolutely incredible. I agree that that's going on. And the other thing we learned, of course, is that I know you'll be shocked at this as well. There are lots of fingers in the pie. That money doesn't go just for its express purpose, as appropriated and then administered by the USAID.
And sadly, that is not solely on one side of the aisle or the other.
Correct. Absolutely
Which
correct.
Which is why you're seeing even Republicans push back on on the Doge cuts and USAID cuts.
Correct.
Because they were skimming off the top, too.
So, certainly not suggesting that about our U.S. senators or the 26. Don't have any evidence of that. But to your point, it does seem like there
does seem like Lindsey Graham had something to do with it.
Yeah, I agree. It seemed like there's familial connections as well that were involved in sucking off the old slush fund there. That it's really what it is. And this really is what prompted me to finally take the position, maybe we just ought to end all federal grants. Because it just seems like even those that you may look at on the surface that say, well, gee, we need to be funding, for example, research at our universities. Cancer research is one that comes up. And, man, the Democrats are just pouncing on that one. Oh, my gosh, we're ending all. And I guess my question would be, or my purpose for questioning whether or not we need to continue federal grants is that a function of government? And shouldn't we maybe be funding such research with private dollars as opposed to, and again, I'm going to remind you, we borrow 50 cents. Can't we just start with the idea that, hey, guys, we don't have it. We're broke. I'm sorry. No grants. Maybe that's the starting point. So back to the Doge stuff. So we got 26 senators that voted against Rand Paul's amendment, which dealt with some, not all, of the funding in USAID. One of those, there was like half a dozen different funding areas. One of those is food. And food, American-produced food products that we export. Well, they're purchased from American farmers. So it's USAID funding, purchasing American farmer-produced food products. And there were concerns about that affecting our farmers. So that to itself just shows you how deadgum distorted everything's gotten in that, wait, our farmers are relying on this federal program for their own viability, and we're borrowing 50 cents of every dollar on it. That's like just the circular firing squad, in my view. We'll continue the discussion on this on the other side of the break. There's more complicated nuances, and we'll try to unravel it for you. Stay with us. We're in the Element Well studio.
For a limited time, get the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays, SuperTalk Mississippi from the Element Well studio. So, just back to the situation with the DOGE cuts, the savings identified. So we had this amendment. It was voted down. This amendment was to the continuing resolution. That was in March. That was when the president, he requested that the Congress, rather than trying to rush through a budget package, what is now known as, we just discussed, the One Big Beautiful Bill, he said, look, let's go ahead, since we're running out of money again in the government funding, let's go ahead and extend it through September. The present level of funding. In other words, the funding levels appropriated under the Biden administration for fiscal year 24. Let's go ahead and continue that through the end of fiscal year 25 at September 30th. In the meantime, let's then focus on a 10-year budget package that, of course, extends the Trump tax cuts and sets the framework up for the budget, the one big, beautiful bill. And that's when Rand Paul said, I'm going to take this opportunity, I know you're shocked at this, Rhino, to call attention to myself and get some airtime. Here's an amendment. And all it really did was cut out some of the USAID funding. And 26 senators said, no, that doesn't really, it's not the time to deal with that. We're going to tackle that when we negotiate the one big beautiful bill and future appropriations. All right, so that failed. The Congress gets to work on the one big beautiful bill. And then people say, well, how come there's none of the DOGE cuts included in it? Here's why. Because it's a budget reconciliation measure. That means it only deals with taxes and mandatory spending, not the spending which is appropriated, known as discretionary spending. The USAID funding, all the foreign aid that people understandably complain about all the time, that is appropriated annually by the Congress. That's discretionary spending. This package deals with mandatory spending. What's that? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, SNAP benefits, a range of other financial assistance programs are all part of mandatory spending. Why is it called mandatory? Because it was established by law. It's not appropriated. It happens without any action on the part of the Congress. In fact, that plus debt interest is now more than 70% of federal outlays. The Congress can do nothing, and 70% of the money the federal government currently spends is going out the door. Do it by doing nothing. They're not involved in that process or in managing or appropriating those programs whatsoever. How can they change them? Law. This is to your act of Congress example a minute ago. So, the vast majority of the stuff the DOGE team found, it's discretionary spending. All the crazy things from USAID and the grants that you've seen, all kinds of stuff. SBA loans, for example, didn't they find that we got 12-year-olds getting SBA loans and stuff like that, which wasn't a difficult task. It just took somebody who cares, the point you make all the time. It just said, hey, wait a second, the birthday show, this person's 12. Maybe we ought not to be loaning them taxpayer money. You know it's a scam when you see that. But because people have that, it's not my problem attitude, it just goes untouched. So the DOGE guys come in there and just run some fairly simple queries, honestly, looking for key types of data like that against these databases. Say, wait, you're loaning money to illegals. You're loaning money to people who don't have, credentials. You're loaning money to minors. This is nuts. So all that is appropriated. Thus, it's not included in the budget package. Now, there is a lot of spending on these USAID programs, for example, that's already been approved. Was approved in the continuing resolution, the continuation of that spending, which passed in March, which the president wanted. So now, however, just found this out. It happened within the last 24 hours, Rhino. You saw it. We tickled it the last couple of weeks. So the White House is sending over a proposal for rescissions. Rescission simply means we're gonna stop spending money, discontinue spending money that's already been approved. Rescission. So that is now in the hands of the House, this rescission package, to rescind a lot of this crazy USAID spending. In fact, that's exactly what is inside the proposal from the White House. By the way, it's $9.4 billion. I'm certainly not saying that's nothing, but the DOGE team has identified $170 billion. $9.4 billion is poised to be rescinded, previously approved, rescinded through the proposal from the White House to the House However, a law has to be passed. It does require an act of Congress. But the good news is rescinding previously approved spending, which was approved and appropriated with a simple majority in the Senate, can be rescinded with a simple majority in the Senate. Why is that important? Because you ain't going to get 60 votes in the Senate if you couldn't rescind this spending with a simple majority. If it required a supermajority, filibuster-proof majority, you're not getting 7 Democrats to join 53 Republicans. And in fact, Rhino, it's questionable as to whether or not all 53 Republicans will support this rescission package that has been transmitted. We haven't yet determined the procession process from the White House over to the Capitol. A little different situation than the state government. But that's what's on the books, or on the boards, I should say, right now. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. Now, if this thing passes the House or doesn't pass the House or the Senate, we're all over it. I will be the first to complain and condemn. What the hell are you talking about? You're okay with sending money for Sesame Street in Iran? Are you kidding me? And drag queens in Ecuador? Unacceptable, people. That's a different story. Now, what about future such nonsensical spending? That will be handled in the next appropriations bill. So what they're doing is, let's rescind a lot of the craziness right now, pronto quico, which means we ain't spending any more money on it between now and the end of September, at which point the Congress will hunker down, starting in the House, and they will appropriate. They'll pass appropriations bills. I pray through regular order, the 12 bills that appropriate the discretionary functions. And this is what we're going to be watching for. Is there going to be money in there for USAID? Are there going to be strings attached to SBA funding? Are we going to re-up money for these stupid grants that are all over the place? So that's what we got to be watching for. Now, some other things Doge found is, hey, we got buildings we don't need. We're canceling leases. We got people we don't need. Let's terminate them. We've got contracts with third parties that are producing nothing we don't need. Let's cancel them. Well, a lot of that stuff's already happened. So why am I pointing that out? Because that doesn't require codification. You don't have to codify canceling a lease, terminating a contract, firing employees, for example. Now, could you? Yeah, you could. An act of Congress, Rhino, you could literally pass a law that says we're never going to provide grants to whomever, name it, one of these crazy grant recipients again. And you could list them all in a law, a bill, an attempt to pass that bill. But here's the problem, guys, the roadblock. It goes to the Senate. You got to have 60 votes. Which means you got to have Democrat support. Is that likely to happen? I'd say not no, but hell no. Let's be honest. Anything Donald Trump wants, Democrats aren't supporting. It doesn't matter what it is. We're not supporting anything this president wants. That's where they stand. So sorry to be so verbose about this, but again, it's complicated. It's more complicated than meets the eye, I think, and I will join everybody else who's upset about Congress not codifying some of this crazy spending that doesn't require codification, honestly. But if they don't pass the rescission package, and which does require codification because it's previously approved spending, and when they set up for negotiating the spending bills, if this September, if they don't eliminate and exclude all that craziness in the spending bills, we'll be raising hell here on Middays. Coming right back.
From the SeabrookPaint.com Weather Center, I'm Bob Sullender. For all your paint and coating needs, go to SeabrookPaint.com. Today, mostly sunny conditions, high near 90 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy, low around 71. Your Thursday, a slight chance of rain, mostly sunny, high near 92. Thursday evening, partly cloudy, low around 72. And for your finally Friday, a 30% chance of showers, mostly sunny, high near 94. This weather is service of our friends at Delta Auto on Highway 51 in Canton. If the engine is a diesel, meow, it's Delta. Delta Auto, Highway 51 in Canton.
At Fillmore Buick GMC, we strive to make buying your next vehicle easy and take care of you long after you drive off the lot. That means upfront and honest pricing, doing everything we can to make the time you spend in the dealership as short or as long as you need. It means we understand that purchasing a vehicle is more than just a transaction for you. We want you to enjoy the experience as much as we appreciate your business. Find your next Buick, GMC, or pre-owned vehicle at FillmoreBuickGMC.com. Fillmore Buick GMC. You drive everything we do.
Hello, my name is John Merrill, the owner of Amada Senior Care. We're your local trusted advisor for senior home care. We provide experienced caregivers for your loved ones so they can remain in their home. Just like you would care for your loved ones, our employees provide assistance with their personal care needs. As your trusted senior advisor, I can help your family navigate the long-term care insurance process. Just call me, John Merrill with Amada Senior Care, for your free in-home consultation. 601-864-3752.
The mowing season is full on here in Mississippi. I'm David Frederick, owner of Frederick Sales and Service in Brandon. The industry-changing Exmark Laser Z commercial mower turns 30 years old this year and has been redesigned with even more great features you just have to see. We have a sale going on with instant rebates and 0% financing is available too. Stop by our store and let our award-winning staff show you the Exmark difference. Fredericks and Exmark, over 3 decades serving you in Brandon since 1993.
Why don't you mind your own business?
Mind my own business? What's that supposed to mean?
No, I was just thinking about all of the news of tax changes, insurance changes, regulations that are being passed down to business owners. I don't have the time to keep growing and to keep up with changing payroll regulations.
I know. It seems like all I do is handle employee-related problems.
You know, I hear People Lease can help.
How can they help?
People Lease can handle our payroll, taxes, employee benefits, and workers' compensation. They even offer an affordable and customizable 401k program and a 24/7 online human resources support center for all my HR needs.
Think of all the time we'll save letting People Lease handle our payroll and benefits administration. I'll be busy growing my business and letting People Lease take care of the rest.
Sounds like a good business plan with People Lease.
Let People Lease mind your business so you can mind your own business. Call now, 601-987-3025. That's 601-987-3025. Or visit freepayrollquotes.com for your free quote.
I'm Kelly Bennett, and you're listening to SuperTalk Mississippi News. A Mississippi man has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of a 2-year-old girl in 2022. Jermarcus Kelly pled guilty to first-degree murder for the death of the little girl who was found unresponsive at a home on Troy Avenue. According to police, she suffered blunt force trauma and was sexually assaulted before being rushed to the University of Mississippi Medical Center, where she passed away. Laurel police are looking for a drive-by shooter that left a 2-year-old girl critically injured on Monday night. According to police, the child was a passenger in a vehicle driving on Ellisville Boulevard near the I-59 exit when shots were fired. The girl was airlifted to UMMC in Jackson. Witnesses described the shooter as a light-skinned black male driving a white 4-door car.
Tune in to Middays with Gerard Gibert each weekday, live from the Element Wealth Studios. Is retirement on your mind? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com to find your balance between income, growth, and guarantees.
When you listen to SuperTalk, you hear our team working for you.
Great information.
Drilling down and getting to the core of the issues that impact you.
They give you the information you need to know.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is professional ball player and former Mississippi State Bulldog, Jake Mangum. To be a strong team, every player has to be dedicated. Farm Bureau is exactly that. Their dedication to providing me with excellent customer service and competitive rates is outstanding. If you aren't already on the team, it's time to join Farm Bureau. Visit favrates.com for great rates on home and auto insurance. Or find a local agent at msfbins.com. Farm Bureau Insurance. Go with the home team.
Join us each Sunday at 7:30 a.m. for the Word of Truth here on SuperTalk Mississippi. That's the Word of Truth, each Sunday at 7:30 a.m. on your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station or online at supertalk.fm.
SuperTalk.fm. SuperTalk.fm. Your one-stop for all the news that matters in the Magnolia State. SuperTalk.fm. Everything you need to know at your fingertips. SuperTalk.fm.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Well, bless my soul, what's wrong with me? I'm itching like a man on a fuzzy tree. My friends say I'm acting wild as a bug. I'm in love. I'm all shook up. Yeah. Well, my hand is shaking.
So, what happened yesterday when we were going off the air, what I was trying to fit into a very short period of time is that we expected this rescission proposal to come over from the White House this week, and it did. It happened overnight after the show yesterday. It does amount to $9.4 billion. So, again, this is simply rescinding spending that was previously approved, specifically for two really major categories: the foreign aid for the crazy stuff through the USAID agency, and the other big cuts or big monies being rescinded are those for PBS and NPR. Very controversial. And, I was saying earlier, Rhino, that a rescission package only takes 50 votes in the Senate to pass because the original funding passed with 50 votes. But if you wanted to codify, for example, if you wanted to write a bill that said, okay, we don't ever lease space on a building, because that's one of the things that the Doge team said is, you got buildings with nobody in them, why don't we cancel these leases? Well, it makes sense to me. I don't want to spend money for buildings that are empty. But if you wanted to codify that, you could write a law that says, I don't know, we don't lease particular buildings, or you could get so restrictive as to say this is exactly the amount of office space or facility leases we're going to authorize for the entire spectrum of government. You could do something that specific. Again, got to have 60 votes in the Senate to get that through, which means it's not going to pass. So this idea of let's codify all this stuff is really kind of wishful thinking. What, again, we got to pay attention to is that which is appropriated, which is the vast majority of the stuff that the Doge team found does not get appropriated again, such as on this USAID stuff, as an example, and some of the other crazy foreign aid spending, and money to the SBA without strings attached that says, when do we get to a point where we could somehow hold accountable the people that work in these agencies for their incompetence other than just firing them, which is something else the Doge team recommended, and there are a lot of people who have been fired and then called back to work, which does not require codification. That's another example. You don't need a law or codification to flag dead people in the Social Security database. You don't need that. Or to enforce current laws with respect to Medicaid eligibility, Social Security disability benefit eligibility, something that the Doge teams found, which we all knew existed and have for a long time. It's just finally somebody, I guess, with a high enough profile pointed it out. I will say it's a little disappointing that the Congress hasn't held recipients of a lot of this money more accountable. Okay, USAID, we're giving you this money. I don't want to see any drag queens in Ecuador stuff. You think you'd have somebody come to the Congress every now and then and say, hey, what are you spending money on?
It's almost like the people in charge of getting these grants are somehow related to or loosely connected to members of Congress.
Something else we've learned as part of this process. So what I was saying at the end of the show yesterday that I misspoke on is that this $9 billion rescission package coming from the White House that hopefully the Congress will act on swiftly is equal to now 3 days of interest on the debt. That's the predicament we are in. In doing a little research on where did we stand on all this spending before the pandemic, and where do we stand now? It's rather shocking when you dig into the numbers. Here's an example. You want to know why spending is $7 trillion now, and it was 4.7 in the pre-pandemic 2019 fiscal year? Think about that. 4.7, 7. $2.3 trillion increase over the 2019 fiscal year. And people are saying, it's that Congress, they're spending all that money. Well, technically speaking, yeah. But here is one of the components that has risen sharply since 2019. It's debt interest. The Congress doesn't do anything to appropriate money for debt interest. It just gets paid automatically. And if there were ever a default, the global economy would crash. It was $400 billion in 2019. It's $1 trillion now. So of the $2.7 trillion increase in spending over that 6-year period, $600 billion of that 2.7 is debt interest. Why is the debt interest so high? A couple of things. One is interest rates are higher. Why are interest rates higher? Because of inflation. Why do we get inflation? Because we dropped money out of helicopters in 2020, Trump's last year, in 2021. So the reason debt interest went from $400 billion in 2019 to nearly $1 trillion now is because over $10 trillion of debt was added in that 5-year period of time because of deficit spending, mostly, again, driven by what I think was unnecessary COVID spending. Started out with the Families First Coronavirus Act. I'll never forget it, March of 2020. And by the way, that was a paltry $900 billion. And on its heels, you remember the big one, the CARES Act. And remember us analyzing and scrutinizing. Wait, what the heck's this got to do with COVID? Remember, everybody had their hand out. Gimme. And the next thing you know, it's a $2.1 trillion bill. So $3 trillion of additional spending in 2 months occurred in 2020. Now you know why the debt interest is so high? Because we didn't have the money. We were already running $900 billion deficits. If you were to look up pouring fuel on the fire in the dictionary, right next to it would be those two bills. That's exactly what happened. And then Joe Biden gets in and he says, oh, well, we can't let the economy recover without us having an integral role in that because Donald Trump would be credited for it, right?
I think it was less to take away credit from Trump and more to keep the COVID hysteria continuing because they felt they garnered more power when people were afraid of COVID.
Okay. I'll buy that argument. I'll compromise and say it's a combination of the two. But I'm with you on that. So he then drops money out of helicopters, $1.9 trillion to be exact. Calls it the American Rescue Plan. Because remember what they were telling us, everything's terrible. We got to spend more money. We got to elect Joe Biden to fix it. No, we were coming out of the COVID thing. People were going back to work. You remember this. Everything was getting back to normal. Markets were responding. Jobs were
Which is why
recovering.
I think they had to really shine a spotlight on, look, we got to rescue you from COVID. It's still out there.
So the fire was smoldering. And they come along and just dumped a can of fuel on it. And then we had inflation. And for a year they said, it's transitory. Calm down, you people. No, it wasn't transitory. It's stuck. So now we're stuck with all that debt that got added. It's now $36 trillion. And that's why the largest increase of any spending line item since the pandemic is debt interest. The Congress doesn't do anything about that. We auction Treasury securities continuously, weekly. And third parties buy them. And they expect the United States government to pay interest and principal on that. Rightfully so. That's why the dollar's so strong. That's just why people look around the world buy our debt, because they know the U.S., hey, even if they ain't got the money, they'll print it to pay us. That's the truth. That's the exact situation we're in here fiscally. And the other program that exploded was Medicaid. Almost doubled in that period of time. Why? Because in 2020, this Families First Coronavirus Act that was passed, the theory was that hospitals are going to get and the states are going to get overwhelmed with the cost of treating COVID sickness. And a lot of people are on Medicaid. In Mississippi, it's 750,000 of our 3 million are on Medicaid. And so what they said was the Trump administration, through this Families First Act, said, look, don't disenroll anybody even if they're not eligible. They may have just literally struck gold and become a multimillionaire, but if they're on Medicaid, you can't disenroll them. And in exchange for you keeping them on, we're going to increase the amount of federal dollars we send you to keep them on. So the Medicaid rolls went from about $70 billion to $92 billion. Boom, overnight, because nobody was being disenrolled. And money was pouring out of the federal government into the states, and we all got fat and happy. But in the meantime, we're racking up debt, and now we're paying. But now the government says, okay, well, it's actually happened in 23. You can disenroll all those people now. It turns out that's a little harder than expected. And there's still a bunch of people that aren't eligible that are on it. It's just hard to get to all that. And we're relying on people and not systems to do it. And that's another major problem. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Polly up.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Thanks so much for joining us. So I hope I didn't bore you guys with digging into the weeds of that, but it's not widely understood in our country how this process works, and it just seems like, Rhino, that people, they pounce on things that they often want to be true. You know what I mean? And they run with it, and especially when it's criticism.
How else can you explain how the entirety of the Democrat Party went along with the Joe Biden is sharp as a tack behind closed doors lie?
Unbelievable. It just truly is unbelievable. Head
in the sand, blinders on, and willfully ignorant of reality.
And I'm proud to see and pleased to see that James Comer oversight in the House, U.S. House. Looks like they're going to do a little investigating into this auto pen stuff, and should. I mean, if this was done without the knowledge of the president, some of this, you remember right at the end there, he was just doling out all this money, all this Green New Deal stuff, and all these crazy pardons. I don't think he had a clue any of that was going on. Now you've seen reports, somebody said, yeah, he'd get lost in his closet in the White House. And again, look, we're all subject to that sort of decline. You just can't be the president. That's all we're saying here. And unfortunately, because you lied about it and you were more concerned about your own personal gain, Jill Biden and others, by pushing this guy into office who you knew wasn't qualified, you exposed him. That's what you did. It's kind of a shame that somebody has to deal with that at their age. But, man, they asked for it.
It also shows the par of narcissism for the average Democrat. Although I guess calling George Clooney the average Democrat is not being fair, but he was totally fine going along with it until Joe didn't recognize him as the world-famous George Clooney.
That's true.
Then he got his feelings hurt.
Yeah, you're right about that. Crosby in Inverness says, Mr. G, you are exactly right. There's no such thing as accountability, responsibility, nor consequences in D.C. Do away with all of it and shine a bright light on whatever now they try to push through. It's insane. You know, to your point, I agree, Crosby. And to your point there, one of the things, Rhino, I was thinking about I'd like to see resurrected is what's called the REINS Act. I don't remember what the heck the acronym stands for. It's REINS. But what it really does is it stops regulations from being issued by these deep state agencies. So many times we've shared that, look, it's these faceless bureaucrats that run these agencies. They have more of an impact on American life than the 535 we elect and send to Congress. And fortunately, as the professor was talking about, we've seen the Supreme Court take up some cases where they say, nah, you guys overstepped your bounds here. That's good. The Chevron deference is an example. The big one that got it started was EPA in West Virginia. You remember that? And the Supreme Court got it right and says, no, EPA, the Congress did not authorize you to take such action. And it was, I want to say, hurting the mining industry, right, in West Virginia, it seems, as I recall.
Well, the best example of the EPA getting out over their skis and power grabbing as much as possible was under Obama when they tried to claim that any puddle in your backyard was an important waterway to the United States, so they should take control of it.
Unbelievable. So the REINS Act actually did pass the House. It's been a while, but it didn't get taken up in the Senate. Now, Senator John Thune, the majority leader, he has informed the media that there's still a chance to revive the REINS Act. He promises he's going to do everything possible to have it included in the final budget reconciliation bill. I'm not sure if it would pass muster with the Senate parliamentarian, but I believe this is perhaps could be one of the most impactful pieces of legislation with respect to the out-of-control swamp. This is the thing that Donald Trump pointed out in 2016 when he was talking about the swamp and the deep state, because remember all the crazy stuff going on at the FBI and certainly in the judicial
Strzok and his bimbo.
Yeah, all that stuff. It completely
Which
politicized.
the Biden administration then paid them millions of dollars for their suffering.
Unbelievable. So Tim from Tupelo says, to break it down simple, mandatory would be paying my rent. Discretionary would be a trip to Bora Bora for 2 months. Well, kind of, Tim. It's there's a lot of stuff, no doubt, in the discretionary spending that is just unnecessary and unneeded, and I believe is not consistent with the constitutionally appropriate functions of government. But keep this in mind, Tim, that half of that discretionary spending is defense. So I do believe that's a constitutionally appropriate and responsibility of government. The question is, how much money should we be spending on defense? And what are the proper areas that we should be spending? And shouldn't we be holding the Pentagon accountable for a whole bunch of assets they just can't seem to find and locate? So, but yeah, that's the part that's appropriated and is discussed, negotiated, acted upon by Congress. Ben from Madison says, I'm very skeptical we will ever see regular order. Continuing resolutions, unfortunately, have become the norm. The Republicans can't blame anyone else that go around with the trifecta in place. I agree. Let's hope we get back to regular order. Coming right back after Fox News and Super Talk News from the Element Wealth studio.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. You are tuned in to Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
So, appreciate you joining us today on the ceasefire text line. A little bit back here at home. We've been talking all morning about the budgetary matters going on up there in Washington, and hopefully the explanation we provided was helpful and enlightening. I hope it wasn't boring. Somebody on the ceasefire text line said, no, it's not boring, it's just depressing. I hear you. I understand. And it's not anything to be depressed about. Let's recognize the truth. I think that's what's important. Let's manage to the truth and reality and strip the dang politics out of this. Honestly, and again, I'm just going to be perfectly honest here. And this may be to the chagrin of many in my own party. It's definitely not as bad as the fear-mongering we're getting from the Democrats. That's over the top. Crazy. That's push grandmother off the hill sort of junk. People dying in the streets and all that junk. On the other hand, I don't know that I'm completely in alignment with the growth predictions coming from Republicans with respect to the budget and how that will offset the present level of deficit spending. And so it's kind of timely, but the CBO, and again, we could argue all day long about how accurate is the CBO with their predictions. Just released new report this morning, and they're talking about this big bill, the one big beautiful bill. They said, yep, it cuts taxes, it slashes some federal programs. They maintain it would add $2.4 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. Now, once again, clarification and explanation and nuance are important here. That doesn't mean that over the next 10 years, our debt will increase by $2.4 trillion over its present level of $36 trillion. Now, what it means is that our debt will increase by $2.4 trillion over what will be added to the debt if no bill was passed. There's a clear distinction there. So why is that important? Because we're on a $2 trillion annual deficit run rate, meaning we're going to add $2 trillion plus to the debt indefinitely per year. What the CBO says is, okay, well, it's $2 trillion. Just go ahead, since it's over 10 years here, just go ahead and add another $400 billion to that. Instead of being $200 billion. Instead of being $2 trillion, it's going to be $2.2 trillion. That's what the CBO's saying. They're not saying, oh, well, you're going to add $2.4 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. No, they're saying $2.4 trillion in excess of what will be added if no bill were passed. So they're pointing that out. They're saying 10.3 million people will lose health insurance. I'm skeptical of that figure. I think that's a little overblown. So the Republicans contend, no, this is going to create so much economic growth that our revenues are going to soar, and thus it's budget neutral. Not going to trim the deficits, not going to increase it. And I hope and pray that's correct. Because what that means is that we're all making much more money. And because we're making more money, we're paying more taxes because there's more taxable income. And corporations are producing more profit. And they're therefore paying more taxes. And if that's the case, that means the markets are going to increase rather sharply. I hope all that is the case. I really do. The jobs report came out this morning. It was weak. Hiring has slowed down. Job openings slowing down. Corporations are cutting back. That was actually received as somewhat positive news by the markets because it's thought to be sending a signal to the Fed, you guys really need to cut interest rates here to stimulate the economy. Those things kind of work in opposite directions. So that's what's going on there. Larry Kudlow says debt interest is no problem because we mostly owe it to ourselves. Yeah, I've made this point. Rhino can attest to that 1,000 times on this program. That's Tom in Lumberton. That doesn't mean it's not a problem. We still have to pay it. It's just that it refutes this widely held belief that we borrow money from China to fund the government or from foreign nations in general. That's absolutely categorically false. Of the $36 trillion of debt, $7 trillion is held by foreign nations, $700 billion by China. It has less than 2% of our total debt. Most of that debt's held by American institutions, American investors, financial institutions, the Fed, etc. Agree. Totally. The part of the BBB that is just odd to me is the section that stops any state from placing restrictions on AI for 10 years. I mean, why? I agree with you. I don't like that either. And you may be aware, may recall that the governor signed a bill, it came out of the Senate, that would establish an artificial intelligence regulation task force here in the state of Mississippi. I think it was a good idea. And it came about because many members of the legislature here in Mississippi were filing various bills to regulate AI. And it was kind of a patchwork. There really wasn't coordinated effort. And so I think lawmakers and the governor had a good idea. Hey, why don't we just kind of take a breather here and let's put some folks together to make some recommendations that can represent the various factions. So I'm pleased and proud, honored to report that I have been asked to serve on that task force. And but I too really have concerns about, well, gosh, if the federal government prohibits the states from regulating AI, I actually believe that conflicts with the principle of federalism, that the states should have the authority to regulate it as they see fit. So I'm hoping that gets stripped out, that doesn't happen. Jason in Starkville says, don't stop believing, Gerard. Hell no, never will, Jason, just so you know. I'm just pointing out the truth and the facts around all these issues so that we can address them. I'm not condemning or complaining. I just want to get it out there to, honestly, Rhino, to refute what's not fact. That's the problem. And we don't need to be managing to untruthful inputs, incorrect, inaccurate inputs. And I'm afraid that happens a lot. I know you're shocked at that as well. Wasn't the CBO awfully wrong in 2016 after Trump's original tax cut, says Larry Mize? No, not really, Larry. What they were wrong about was the amount of revenue. They didn't anticipate the amount of revenue would increase that dramatically, but they're also limited with the dynamic scoring. What did happen is the deficits they predicted absolutely did come to pass. They predicted deficits. They were dead on that. It's just that, in my view, you can't attribute that to the tax cuts. In fact, revenues rose. The problem is so did spending, and even during the Trump administration. And now we're stuck with this big problem because all that dead-gum COVID spending racked up all this debt, and now we have this $1 trillion a year debt interest problem that we can't make go away, and we keep adding to it because we still deficit spend. So I super-duper hope, sincerely, that, and I do believe that these policies will boost and bolster the economy. I absolutely believe. And the one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is the immediate expensing provision that's being restored. This is big time to small and mid-sized businesses, which are so critical in powering our economy. If a small and mid-sized business knows they can buy, for example, new equipment, new computer equipment, as an example, because they all use it, and they can write it all off against their taxes in the year of purchase, man, that's a big, big persuasive argument to make that purchase now and not delay it. When you have to write it off over the life of the asset, 5, 7, 10 years, you don't get the tax benefit of that in the year of purchase. It just has an amazing effect on the mindset of business owners, and that's a key provision that I absolutely do think will do more to stimulate growth than anything else. Just simply extending the existing tax environment the way it is, I just don't see that being too much of a boost and stimulative to the economy. It's just what we have now. So it's not like this major change. But, yeah, restoring this immediate expensing and Section 179 provision, no doubt, that's a significant change in current tax policy, and that will have a massive impact on small and mid-sized businesses that I do think will boost the economy. Will that translate to more revenue, more tax revenue to the government? so dadgum hard to calculate. That means those small and mid-sized businesses are making a whole bunch more money, and I hope that's the case. We're coming right back with Ricky Mathews. Stay with us.
Hey, check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Well, it's you and me, baby, no one else we could trust. We'll say nothing to no one, know how, or we bust and never crack a smile, or flinch or cry for nobody.
Welcome back, everyone. You are tuned in to Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. We're welcome now Ricky Mathews, host of the Ricky Mathews Show, and also SuperTalk Outdoors. I saw you there, Ricky, banging the drums, air drumming before we went live. What a bunch of fun that was a couple of weeks ago.
Wasn't it fun? It was
really
fun to get reconnected with music. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Listen, it was interesting when I was publisher in New Orleans at the Times-Picayune and president of NOLA Media Group. I kept a pair of drumsticks on this meeting table that it was a kind of cozy, just two seats at the table in my office. So when community leaders came in, they would see the drumsticks, and it was start conversations. Oh, I play drums.
How about that?
Guitar, I play piano. You just never know. But there's a musical connection with all of us at the end of the day.
There's no doubt. That was so much fun, and what great work by Mayor Billy Hughes and Mayor Fofo Gillich. Just a great event for a great cause. Beautiful weather right there in Centennial Plaza. It just couldn't have been more perfect. I will admit, you and I talked when we practiced Wednesday night. I was a little nervous, hadn't been in front of people playing drums in a long time, so naturally you're nervous about that. But I wanted to perform well, as we all do, of course. And with a limited amount of practice, you just kind of hope instincts take over. And I think for all of us, they did, and it turned out to be really good.
It was a great event. It really was. I hope to maybe have the opportunity to do it again.
Me too.
And Centennial Plaza, the way that was set up as an outdoor venue,
perfect. What
a great opportunity for future concerts. Wow.
I agree. That was awesome. And it was just first class.
What a beautiful campus.
Man, it totally is. So first class, so neat, had a lot of fun, raised money, all good stuff. But it looks like we've got some contentious races, particularly for the Gulfport mayor's race. And it looks like we may have, we know we're going to have a new mayor, but it looks like that Hugh Keating, the Republican candidate, aside from all the controversy, is going to prevail. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's really across coastal Mississippi, we're going to have a number of new mayors.
Yeah, it's true.
So democracy is alive and well in coastal Mississippi, that's for sure. But in the Gulfport race, Billy Hughes had been in that position since, I think, 2013. And, the folks that were supporting Sonia Williams Barnes believed that this was one they might be able to get. And, you probably have talked about it, but this group that Brandon Presley is the co-chair of, this Dirt Road Democrats PAC, identified Gulfport as one of those races that might be close, and so they went all out. I mean, look, they had 177 absentee ballots back in 2021, had over 1,000 this time. So their efforts to get out the vote was very significant. And, Hugh won by over 1,000 votes, looks like about 55% of the votes. But it was, you're talking about door-to-door canvassing, using mailing, all the stuff that you normally see. Of course, the accusations flying back and forth, et cetera. It was wild and woolly going into Election Day.
It was, but as it stands right now, last data I checked, Hugh Keating, the Republican, up by some 1,100 votes with 1,400 absentees yet to be counted. So, if the trend in the outcome of those absentees remains level with the votes that were cast prior to Election Day, he would end up winning the race.
Yeah, I think at least the people I talk to say that he's sitting in a very good spot. But you know what's interesting? As much as the efforts on Sonia Williams-Barnes' side, where you have Stacey Abrams and all of those folks involved, and then of course you had national attention on Hughes' side as well. What it did is everyone decided to go vote.
Exactly.
Not just one side. All sides. I mean, this is what democracy at a local election should look like, aside from the accusations of vote buying and all that. But you want to see a vigorous discussion about leadership in a city, and it was good to see, the democracy play out the way it did.
Yeah, I totally agree. And who would have thought that we'd have had so much attention focused on the city of Gulfport? I mean, you get national figures get involved in this race. Had Senator Tim Scott, a one-time presidential candidate, comes to support the Republican candidate. And, of course, no secret that the Democratic candidate had lots of help from Democratic headliners as well, including those from out of state, including money pouring in. So clearly they thought there was a pretty good chance.
Right. And look, is this a bellwether of future races across the country? I mean, listen, most politics plays out locally.
Yeah.
I think all sides came to play ball in this one. And if this is just an indication of what we're going to see across the country, there's going to be some serious, competing going on.
Yeah. Let's talk about the city of Jackson, the capital city of Mississippi. We got a new mayor there as well. Of course, we knew we were going to get one after the primary in April when Senator John Horn won the field, but not enough to avoid a runoff. But he wins in the runoff and then becomes the candidate in the general. Looks like he's good to go. He's going to be the new mayor. I think this is his fourth attempt to win that office. He, of course, is a state senator. He's been in this studio many times.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for him. And he reminds me a bit of Billy Knight, the mayor of Pascagoula, who ran a number of times before he was elected. And I think, Billy is in his 80s, and there's no sign of stopping. What a terrific, inspiring leader he is. But, J.T. Mitchell, when he was on my show, he's on my show every Friday, and we talk about news and whatever. But we've consistently talked about why what happens in Jackson is important to people here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I mean, we needed to resolve some of the issues there. I think John Horn's going to bring some leadership back to the city, and we'll get moving in the right direction. I'm confident of that.
It certainly does represent what I would say is a fairly abrupt change from the Lumumba administration, and of which Senator Horn's been critical. So, and we got some new city councilmen as well, and women. So it's new government in the capital city. And you're right. It is important. It is critical for the capital city to thrive. We all rely on that. It affects us all, indirectly or directly. So hopefully that'll be the case.
Too many issues. From the water to the crime, too many issues. But the way the legislature and the governor and other city officials sort of rallied to get crime down and to address the water problems, and now we got a new mayor. That's the way it's supposed to work, man. And hopefully the mayor can pick it up and run with it and bring calmness back to the conversation.
Let's talk about state matters. The legislature, as you know, was unable to come to an agreement on a budget. The governor had to call a special session. That just occurred. And it took them a couple of days, but they finally did pass a budget. It seems like there's a lot of friction. Is that a way to put it, between the House, the Senate, and to some extent the mansion as well?
Well, I think it's been there for a while. You know that as well as I do. That the big three, for whatever reason, have not been able to get on the same page about things. It's unfortunate because you got a Republican, leadership. You would think that they would, let's get together on these top three issues. But they've just not been able to do that. And, there's a myriad of reasons for that, but the tensions still prevail. And what's unfortunate about it, what else is getting missed? What other legislation is not happening? Why these things are happening? Yeah. It's a little unfortunate. I wish we could do better.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back on the 2025 session, it's hard to put your finger on any just major achievements because so much of the legislation is controversial and there's no consensus on it.
Yeah. I mean, why don't they spend more time when they're not in the legislative session just talking? I don't know. Let's develop an agenda, a conservative agenda for Mississippi, and let's focus. Let's go. We're going to disagree on these things, but let's agree on these things.
And I
wish they'd do it.
I agree. And I didn't mean to omit or avoid the tax reform bill. That was a major piece of legislation, but that happened in a quirky way, as you know. So I'm not sure what the future holds for that. It was a big deal, but there are a lot of other things that just can't seem to get across the finish line because you can't unite and gain consensus.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Hey, but we got direct shipment of wine. It took 13 years to make that happen.
Representative Hank Zoomer instrumental in that. I've actually pointed to that as maybe the biggest achievement of the whole session is we can buy our wine directly now. So, but it won't be long. We'll be talking about it again. So, but Ricky, always good to talk to you. Enjoyed being with you down there a couple of weeks ago. That was a whole bunch of fun. I'm with you. Maybe we passed the test and we'll be invited back to participate. I would certainly love to do that. Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
I know you did very well. You did very well.
You did too, Ricky. It was a lot of fun. All right,
Thank you,
folks.
my friend.
Appreciate it. Yep, we're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Yes, Karine Jean-Pierre has left the Democrat Party and has announced she is becoming an independent. I didn't really see a whole lot of explanation of that, but that's where we are. Karine Jean-Pierre, now an independent.
I believe she blamed disillusionment with the Democrat Party.
Disillusionment got her. Okay. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi, it's Pride Month, right? Why do we have a month to celebrate someone's sexual orientation?
Well, it may be, but we're obviously not going to have a proclamation from the White House. That question was answered yesterday.
That's absolutely for sure. And we're not going to see a series of tweets either coming in Facebook posts from Joe Biden and or the White House with some nonsense every day. Nancy Pelosi is outraged. I know you're shocked. She's outraged about something because Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered that a certain ship, which bears the name of what the Democrats describe as a gay icon. How does one become a gay icon, by the way?
Well, I don't think I don't have a radio-friendly answer to that.
Harvey Milk is revered by the LGBTQ2, I can't even say them all anymore, movement for being one of the first openly gay men elected to public office. That to the office of Board of Supervisors, the supervisor, in 1977 in San Francisco. He was shot and killed about a year later. Does it make sense, though, for this person the name of this person to be used for a United States warfighting vessel?
I mean, he served in the United States military for 4 years.
Okay.
He did like to campaign on the fact that he was dishonorably discharged for being a homosexual, even though he was not.
Okay.
And he did have relations with a 16-year-old man when he was 33. And he wrote a letter to Jimmy Carter defending Jim Jones.
Oh, my gosh. Well, as you know, of course, all of us have some degree of baggage in our past. It's just how egregious the baggage is, how serious it is. But Pelosi's all upset.
I would say
about
statutory rape and vigorous defense of a mass murderer kind of outweighs the 4 years of military service.
I'm with you. I agree. The NFL, you remember, they were all in on the pride stuff. In the NBA, the MLB, all the big sports organizations. But this year, some teams have decided to opt out of their pride celebrations. You know, we celebrate mothers on a day, fathers on a day. We have a Veterans Day, the birth of our country, the birth of Jesus Christ. I just don't know. Do we need to celebrate this sort of stuff? It doesn't make sense to me why we have to carve out a month like that for some special demographic. I struggle with that.
Especially considering they've carved out another 125-ish days on the calendar for each individual niche, kink, and fetish.
And that's exactly right. What do we need all that kind of crazy stuff for?
Because there's an outsized portion of the population that derives their entire personality from what's between their legs and who they sleep with.
Oh, boy. I was afraid you were going to say something like that, unfortunately. And I struggle to understand it, I guess. Oh, man.
That's what happens when you may be an adult body, but you have the mind of a tweenager.
Well, I caught, I'm looking for it now. I've lost it. But I caught a group in, I think it's Idaho, perhaps, that's having like heterosexual month or something like that, like a bar or something. And they're making some special discounts for those. I found that kind of interesting, kind of fascinating. Oh, man. But the Fed is, I would agree, the federal government, I don't think you're going to see a lot of stuff coming from the federal government related to that kind of stuff. Yeah, Heterosexual Awesomeness Month. Beer for Breeders Monday. All heterosexual.
That's the derogatory term for heterosexuals as flung around by homosexuals.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Breeders?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. This says Beer for Breeders Monday, by the way. All heterosexual males dressed like heterosexual males receive one free draft. Yeah, that's so good. Duo Deal Wednesdays. Half off entire food and beverage bill for heterosexual couples. Golly. This is the Old State Saloon in Idaho. An excellent mockery, I would say, of it. And again, I just point out, I don't care about your sexual orientation. You do whatever the heck you want to as an adult, free country. I just don't know about a whole month where we're supposed to do what exactly. I'm not sure.
I'm reminded of the Norm Macdonald conversation he had. I forget who was interviewing him, but it was well before wokeism took hold of society the way it did. And he was questioning pride parades, and he used the word pride in that. And he's like, is it really something to be proud of? Who you sleep with?
No, it's not.
I mean, if you got two groups of parents talking on a park bench about their progeny, and yeah, so-and-so got into Harvard, I'm real proud of them. And I can't finish the rest of it the way Norm did on the radio, but an act of intimacy between two men is that really something the parents are proud of?
Exactly. It's all insane in my view, and it just got ratcheted up so significantly under the Biden administration. I just thought it was wrong. Wasn't it? Didn't we find out that like VA hospitals were like hoisting pride flags? Remember that? And folks in our listening area were reporting it for the VA hospital on the coast. And it was like, I think Congressman Michael Guest, as I recall, got wind of it. Ultimately, they took it down. But like, why does that even happen in essentially a government installation like that? Is that not preferential treatment that we're not supposed to do? It seemed to me like it is. Because I guarantee you, if you put like a cross or something somewhere, somebody gripe about it. Oh no, you're mixing religion and
it's
government.
It's because the left refuses to acknowledge that their ideologies and dogmatic principles of wokeism are their own religion.
No doubt. On the C Spire text line, Gerard, I appreciate you constantly talking about the state of the economy. The only way people get motivated to solve a problem is by hearing about it in repetition. Well, I hope so. And my purpose and my goal is just to inform and enlighten and educate, because it's hard to really understand the truth when you just consume the talking points coming from the various political people. Of course, they're always going to say whatever bolsters their case and their position. That's fine. That's what they do. But I just feel like people need to know the truth. Did Navy Secretary Ray Mabus name that ship for milk? I'm not sure. I don't remember who was involved in that.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. I do remember it was controversial, and that could be. Let's see here. Has there ever been an acknowledgement of an iconic straight man? That's a good point. Well, this saloon up in Idaho, Beer for Breeders Monday.
I mean, not to just really get controversial here in the last 45 seconds of this segment, but there were a lot of murals painted of George Floyd.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain he didn't like dudes.
Also, I agree. I have a message here. I'm not sure if I can read it. Tell me if this is dumb or not, Gerard. I think the federal government should cut federal Medicaid by 5% per year for the next 10 years. Social Security should be cut off from new recipients for persons aged 50 or younger, with existing recipients of people 50 or older entitled to Social Security is normal. But with all persons aged 49 or younger receiving their lifetime benefits in lump sum or annuity payments with the responsibility on the people themselves, my plan. Yeah, I hear you. I'll get to it on the next segment.
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Tim from Tupelo says, I got to have more cowbell. CC in Senatobie says that the beers for breeders should be for birthing persons and non-birthing persons, I think. Oh, say it louder for those in the back, Rhino. That's Michael in New Albany. We don't need a month to celebrate the alphabet lifestyle. I mean, I don't know that we need a month to celebrate anything, honestly. A month. I'm talking about the length of time, but I just don't think that one's sexual orientation should be recognized in that way, and all the amount of money and focus and everything else that because there are lots of retailers in particular that will do all kinds of promotions as a result of that you know.
Although it appears Target has backed away from it.
Big time.
What would be their Pride section for the month of June is apparently being set up in stores as a USA section.
Yeah, I saw that. And they're the ones
patriotic apparel and merchandise.
Good for them. They're the ones a couple years ago, you remember, came out with the deadgum swimsuits for children that were designed to accommodate transgender children, right? Remember that crazy crap?
To hide male genitalia.
To make them, like, at least to have this perception image that they're females, right? To hide the male parts. Nice. Great.
So that the whack job parents can feel virtuous about something.
Nail on the head there. The whack job parents. No doubt. So, the text we got just before we went off, I'm looking for it right now. I may have, here we go, on the 662. Yeah, so the idea that, okay, if you're below the age of 50, you're just out of Social Security, we're either going to refund your money as a lump sum that you paid in, or we're going to pay you over time. So the problem with that is, if you mean by that those people are just out of Social Security, which means they would no longer be paying into Social Security, which means that Social Security benefits to all those that remain in the program would cease immediately, because that's how we pay for it. It's a pay-as-you-go program. The collections from active members that are employed in Social Security that are on their payroll, the payroll, so-called payroll tax, that's what funds benefits.
That would be a great idea if Social Security were run like, all right, I pay Social Security out of every paycheck, and it goes into an account with my name on it. And when I retire, I'm going to draw money out of that account. His idea would work in that scenario. The problem is we don't live in that scenario, because the people currently working are paying for the people retired.
Correct.
And the people that will be working will pay for the current workers when they retire.
And the key distinction
if it even still exists by the time the current workers retire.
The key distinction is that if we convert it, they're not essentially converting it to a private sector-like 401k plan. When you run out of money, you're out of money. In Social Security, just like Mississippi PERS, no, you may draw a whole lot more than you ever paid in, plus any investment income you earned while you were making those contributions, because it's benefits for life until you die. The easiest way to explain it, I've said it many times, is Ida Mae Fuller. She was the first Social Security recipient, paid in $24. She received out $22,000 because she lived to be 100. So that's why it's a good idea. Now, you could do what's being suggested here, Rhino. Just say, hey, look, below 50, you're out. You no longer pay in, but you're no longer eligible, and here's your money back. You could do that if you went out and funded it with about $20 trillion. Just wrote a check, which means we'd have to go borrow more money to give $20 trillion to Social Security so that it would be in its trust fund to cover benefits for the duration of all those who are currently receiving benefits, or those over 50 that are at some point eligible. It's kind of like what Mississippi's doing with PERS. PERS, we're just writing checks. We've written, a couple $100 million worth so far to attempt to shore up the finances of PERS. It's the same thing. You can fix the problem just by dumping a bunch of money into the trust fund and investing it, let it manage, and that would carry you. What that figure needs to be, I'm not sure, but in Mississippi, it's multiple $billion, I can tell you that. We're not in a position to write checks like that. And neither is Social Security as well, or the federal government, to take care of Social Security in this way. But I get it. As far as the 5% decrease in Medicaid, that remember what you're doing there is you're cutting 5% funding to the states to pay for Medicaid, which means they'd have to cover it. Now, I'm on record of saying I don't have a problem with phasing out the Medicaid program at the federal level and transferring the operation and the administration, which is already administered by the states, but the funding of it, which means in the state of Mississippi, that would be extremely difficult to deal with. The amount of money we receive from the federal government right now, annually, $7+ billion. That's more than our general fund budget. Be hard to make the finance and the math work, but it's just an idea if we are truly serious about tackling the deficit and the debt at the federal level. But we are out of time here today. We've had a good show. We appreciate you joining us. We'll be back in the Element Wealth studio again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
SuperTalk Mississippi Media Production.